with that in mind, let's go ahead and kick this thing off. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Chad right now, and we're going to talk about the analytics that you need for growth.
Awesome. Thank you, Peter. So to start the conversation here, we want to frame some of these analytics a little bit and be able to tell a story as we're going through this entire presentation. So we're going to frame everything by what we call the shopper journey. So this is what the shopper journey looks like. It starts with awareness, and you can see that it continues way over through retention and advocacy. So a couple of the metrics that you need to be able to measure to be able to effectively map out the entire shopper journey, first one is going to be brand impressions. So really quickly we'll go through why you need to measure brand impressions and how to do that, which is going to capture that awareness stage. From there we're going to talk about interest and being able to track things like monthly unique visitors and clicks and ways to improve that. From there, we'll go through to consideration, which is measured by customer database records, purchase, which is what a lot of retailers focus on, which is measured by conversion rate and average order value. And then we'll go into some newer but highly important fields, which include retention and advocacy. So I know Jake has a lot of really great slides around lifetime value, so I'm excited to hear about that part. And then advocacy is where we'll pick that up and talk more about referrals towards the end of this. So here's a quick template that you could use to sort of measure that customer journey. You can see at the top there it has all of your campaigns. So if you aggregated everything across all of your campaigns and you mapped out how many brand impressions, how many clicks, how many new customers you were able to identify, conversion rate, lifetime value, and referrals, and then you start to segment that out by really specific campaigns. So things like your Black Friday email or like your Refer a Friend program, you start to get a more holistic view of where the gaps might be in the journey. So I'm going to pass this part over to Jake. I think he has a really good note on this recent e-commerce investor report that they pulled together.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, Chad, and thanks to the whole AddShoppers team for including us on this webinar. I'm super excited about it. The benchmark that Chad was talking about, so we just released this report that really focuses on the second half of the shopper journey that Chad mentioned, specifically around the number of customers, the average order value, retention, and brand advocacy that companies see when they're looking at their most loyal customers. And I mentioned that this benchmark is around some of the top performing companies, and by that I mean specifically the top 25% or top quartile of our data set, and focus in on that segment for two main reasons. Number one, they're just so drastically different from the rest of e-commerce. They're really doing something special, and it shows up in the results and in the numbers. And then the other piece is that we actually collaborated with another company called Mattermark on the second half of our benchmark report. We're talking about not just e-commerce performance, but also the investment that goes into e-commerce companies from venture capitalists, angel investors, and private equity firms. And one of the really interesting trends that we spotted with them is that the number of companies getting investments, the number of deals that happen, has actually gone down quite a bit, but the size of those investments has actually gone way up. So basically, investors are still willing to open their checkbooks, they're still making investments, but they're only betting on the best of the best companies, and they're betting way more on them than they've ever bet before. So I'll use some of the results we found in this benchmark to put some perspective around the numbers we're talking about here, and hopefully it'll be useful for you all as you're thinking about KPIs you use to run your business.
Okay, great. So a couple key data points or reasons to kind of emphasize that. So why do you need to focus on these data points that we're about to go through? Number one is you never want to fly blind. We have sort of an internal mantra, which is you can't improve what you can't measure. So without measuring a lot of these things, it seems obvious now. I think a lot of people have kind of been driven by the Moneyball approach, figuring out where you can make the most impact on metrics, but you really do need to be able to measure these things so you're not flying blind. The second thing that we're going to highlight is identifying those growth opportunities, which also backs into being able to prioritize your time. So to kick this off, let's go with awareness, or measuring brand impressions. I know for a lot of e-commerce companies, this isn't a metric that you spend a lot of time on because you don't see a whole lot of value in it. But hopefully as we start to map out this entire journey, you'll see that the more that you can optimize those brand impressions to lead to clicks and some of the other strategies that we're going to go through, the more value you're going to be able to see from measuring this KPI. So really quickly, whenever it comes to tracking brand impressions, a few of the things that you're going to want to consider here is number of search impressions. So in Google Webmaster Tool, you can see your organic search impressions, which is going to tell you things like click-through rate by keyword. Obviously, you're going to be able to see this type of data at a retargeting or at a media level. You can also track things like email opens, site visits, PR impressions, social impressions. Pretty much everyone is going to give you some view of how many impressions you're able to track. So for the most part, you probably look at those and then you say, okay, that's great, but I just care about how many clicks came to the site. So I would encourage you to start measuring this because you can impact it and you can start to optimize things for click-through rates later on. Another one really quickly that we're going to go through is measuring that interest stage or the number of monthly unique visitors that you get to your site. So creative ways to increase those monthly unique visitors. Everyone knows how to track it. You can track it in Google Analytics or any number of analytics tools. But here's a few that we've seen to really help boost the amount of traffic that you're getting. The first one is, like we were just talking about, identify those lowest performing click-through rate channels and then start to optimize your copy, optimize your title tags if we're talking about SEO, optimize your subject lines if we're talking about email, and then you can really start to drive up that click-through rate. Another really creative one that we've seen is tackling social contests, so doing things like a selfie to win contest or like a share to win contest that creates a little bit of virility around the contest is another great way to drive up that monthly unique number. And then one that can get a little more expensive, but we've seen really specialized brand have a lot of really good success with these channels, is doing things like paid content marketing. So integrating with networks like Taboola or Outbrain to syndicate your content and start getting some of those paid placements. So now we're going to dive into these next stages in a little more detail and hopefully give you a little more meat here. But the next one is consideration, which is measured by the size of your customer database. So a lot of you probably only track the size of your customer database based off of the orders that have been placed through your platform. So first things first, why track the database size? You need to understand the size of your total customer list and your email subscriber list. And you also need to know how fast that list is growing month to month. If it's only growing based off of the number of orders that you're getting, so if the size of your database is matching the number of orders, then you're missing a huge opportunity to continue the conversation with a lot of those customers who are visiting your digital properties. So a couple creative ways that you can start to boost that database size. Number one is to segment out your email capture modals for better targeting. So a lot of retailer sites, you go to them now and they have a pop-up that says, enter your email for 10% off. And that's pretty much the extent of capturing new customers outside of orders. So it's not a bad strategy, it works. You see about a 1 to 2% email capture rate from those anonymous customers. But at the same time, I think customers are getting pretty burnt out on seeing pop-ups everywhere they go. So we would expect to see that to go down over time. And it doesn't really make sense to show your existing customers an email pop-up whenever they've already been to the site before. So by optimizing based off of where customers come from, so if they come from Facebook, showing them one message. If they come from Taboola or they just read a piece of content, or if they come from a review site or a couponing site, where they come from tells you a lot about their intent whenever they come to the actual site. So it's really important to start to tailor those messages, and by doing that, we usually see about a 30% increase in the number of new emails added to your database each month. Number two is being able to offer as much value as possible in exchange for that email address. So for most of you, if I asked you what capturing an email is worth, it would probably be a really hard question to answer because, for one, you probably don't have a good grasp on your lifetime value. And if you do, you know that it changes by channel. So by giving value of $1 for an email from somebody who comes from pay-per-click might not make sense because you know that those customers only end up placing one order and they only convert at a certain rate. So it's really important to understand by channel what you can actually offer someone, and then being able to offer the most value as possible so that you can start to boost your performance on those. And we mentioned this one, but running contests and giveaways is another great way to boost your database size. It shows intent to engage with your brand whenever they join a contest, and it also allows them to start becoming more familiar with your brand story so that you can push them through that funnel later on.
Hey, yeah, I'll jump in on this one. And this is, I think, maybe where we're going to start to get into some of the things that Pete alluded to in the intro, where the data has the risk of getting dry. I think it's super interesting, and hopefully it'll be useful. And really piggybacking on Chad's point about adding to the database in terms of leads and potential customers, the thing that follows from that is how to actually expand your customer base, you know, the group that's actually made purchases from your business. So for an e-commerce company, any given purchase is going to come from one of two customer types. Either they're brand new, they're buying for you for the first time, or they're a repeat customer who's bought before. And we see that by month 2, the top companies have already broken away from the pack when it comes to their new customers. They're already doubling the number of new customers per month, and this gap widens over time. And like it says on the chart, by the end of year 2, the top performing customers have 5 times as many new customers cumulatively than their counterparts. We can go to the next one. Then if you look at year 3, the top e-commerce companies have a customer base that is now 2.5 times larger. They're doing the strategies that Chad recommended a couple slides ago, and when their acquisition rates are high and their retention rates are stable, which we'll get into a little bit more, the size of the customer base really goes through the roof and expands exponentially. You can go ahead.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for this one, this stage is what we would consider the purchase stage. So again, this is where a lot of retailers focus their time and efforts, but it's typically measured by your conversion rate and your average order value. So why track conversion rate? I'm pretty sure most of you are tracking this, but if you're not, then it's really going to be the one spot where you should start and where you can start optimizing and see the most immediate impact on revenue. It's also going to tell you what's important to your customers. Are customers not converting because they're not getting free shipping? Is it because your return policy isn't good? Is it because they can't find the products they need? It really helps you back into what's important for your customers because it's that moment of truth where they actually order from you. It's also going to help you to maximize things like your revenue per visitor. But one note of caution on this one is if you get really stuck on this metric, it tends to lead to a lot of discounting, because one of the fastest ways to boost your conversion rate is to offer some sort of discount. If I'm on your cart and then I get ready to leave and I was just a browsing customer, if you show me a discount for 50% off, I might buy just because I'm buying that discount. I'm not actually getting value from what you're offering, but I'm buying the discount because I feel like there was some sort of value in the sale that you were having. So you have to be really careful not to get stuck on this metric. It is an important one to measure, but it can lead to some unprofitable strategies if you're not really careful. So this one's pretty interesting. It's average conversion rate by vertical. So whenever you're thinking about how to improve your conversion rate, obviously you want to be among the top performers within your category. So if you're in home and garden, the average conversion rate is 1.98, but if you're in the gifts category, it actually goes up to around 6%. So the average across all e-commerce stores tends to hover around that 2.5 to 3%, but you can see that it does vary by category. So if you're in selling automotive parts, you're probably never going to have a conversion rate of close to 6%, just because a lot of people like to browse on those sites. They like to buy things for their car, and they like to kind of extend out that purchase cycle. But when it's a gift and it's urgent and they have a budget in mind, they're more likely to complete a conversion faster. So a couple creative ways to boost conversion rate. One is to integrate personalization. So from what we're seeing in the marketplace, a lot of people focus this around email personalization. So How do I send a targeted email based off of what someone did on the site or what someone ordered in the past? And email is a great way to do that, but it's definitely not the only way to integrate personalization. Whenever people are shopping on your site, let's say that you get 100,000 visitors to your site each month, you really have a huge opportunity to integrate personalization into that shopping experience and also extend that over into retargeting and some of the other things that you're doing. So just be sure not to spend all your time on email for this part because you're leaving money on the table. Number two is taking into account customer behaviors, especially on mobile devices. And we'll go through a case study for that one here in just a second. And then third is to use smart couponing and beware of open couponing. I'll show you an example of that here in just a second. So the first one, personalization. So by doing things like taking into account their Facebook picture, their name, their birthday, all the data that you're able to capture on customers now, and then creating more of a personalized experience that creates sort of these wow moments for customers, you can see conversion rate increases up to 16% versus non-personalized versions of what we're looking at here. With behavioral targeting, we're going to focus this one on mobile because that's where most retailers are seeing pain right now is how do I get increased conversion rates on mobile. And one of the best ways that we've seen that is to integrate mobile exclusive offers. So whenever someone is on their mobile device, showing certain promotions or campaigns to that group of people, and then really segmenting out mobile traffic into two different categories. And one category would be someone who's on their phone but they're connected to Wi-Fi, and the other would be if someone's on their phone but they're on 3G or 4G. Once you have that data point, you can pretty much predict what the conversion rate is going to be. If someone's on Wi-Fi, they're more likely to convert because they're either sitting at home or in the office on their phone, and they probably have their credit card with them. If they're walking around, they're more likely on 3G or 4G, so it's more about capturing who that customer is so that you can continue them down that shopper journey once they get back to their computer or once they get back home. Smart couponing. So a lot of retailer sites, when you go there, there'll be a banner at the top that says, Happy Mother's Day, use code MOM10 to get 10% off. And they just sort of have those coupons out there. So you're basically training your customers to always look for that coupon code or to always look for that banner. And the customer really never has to do anything to get the code. They just came to your site. So what we see better success with is offering what we would consider like a smart coupon. An example would be entering your email to get a percentage off. The example that we have here, we have a share for 5% off your order. And this is a good way to get additional value from the customer, but at the same time give them some sort of promotion to help improve those conversion rates. So we're going to drop in a case study over on the right if anyone wants to see some more of these really specific examples and you want to brainstorm some of these conversion rate campaigns. But you can see some of the results over here. We've seen mobile conversion rates increase over 200%. We've seen email capture rates improve over 30%, which boosts online revenue over 7%. And there's a lot of really creative campaigns that you can run targeted around changing that conversion rate number that's going to have an immediate impact on your revenue. So the other part of this is average order value. If you can move two dials, it would probably be improving conversion rate and then improving your average order value. So some creative things that we've seen here. Obviously, upsells and cross-sells are a great way to do that, and you can either do it based off someone adding to their cart or having some sort of block in your shopping cart page. But another one that we've seen that's becoming increasingly popular is decreasing the reliance on coupons from your customers. So based off the traffic source that a customer comes from, hiding that coupon code box. If they come from someone like a Retail Me Not or a couponing site, obviously you don't want to hide the coupon code box because they came from there. But if they came from, let's just say, Taboola or a comparison shopping site, and you feel like you've already given that person a great offer, there's no point in saying, hey, here's a coupon code box, be sure you go search for a coupon code. So be really selective about who you're showing that code box to because it's going to shape the behavior of that customer. And then it's always a great idea to introduce a higher-end product than you offer currently. In general, it's sort of the 80-20 rule. If you introduce that product. Maybe 20% of your customer base is going to actually order that product, but it's going to result in a higher percentage of your revenue. And it also helps anchor your product's price at more of like that medium to low level, instead of them assuming that you're super expensive for whatever it is you offer. So if your catalog has kind of the same price across the board, you might want to introduce a really expensive product just to be able to boost the conversion rates and your average order value for those smaller products. So again, another case study we'll drop in here about how to boost your average order value and your conversion rates. So we'll post that over on the right. And these slides are also going to go out after the presentation. So this next piece here, I know that Jake has a lot of really great information around customer lifetime value, which kind of fits into that retention stage of the shopper journey. So really quickly, why track customer lifetime value? Knowing how much you can spend on your paid advertising and your other acquisition sources is really important to running profitable campaigns. You also need to know what you can offer a customer in exchange for a referral or other incentives that we're going to talk through here in a second. And it's also really important to be able to identify your top customers and your top customer segments. So I'm going to kick it back over to Jake to take over from here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I have a little bit of a love affair with customer lifetime value. It's something we deal with all the time at RJMetrics. It was a huge theme of another benchmark report that we put together on buyer behavior. And it's something where we found that the top performing companies, their lifetime value of their customers is around 80% higher than that of their peers. This chart on this slide is actually around average order value, but that's one of the main inputs into CLV, together with the number of purchases. So this is a metric that's near and dear to my heart, and I'll definitely have a lot to say about it. We can go to the next slide. So this chart shows customer lifetime value broken down by percentile. And after the first year a company's in business, the differences really become stark among their different customers and measured in terms of lifetime value. So the top 10% of customers, on average, they're worth 6 times more than the average customer. The top 1% are actually worth 18 times more. So just to put that in perspective, the top 1% are actually, they're going to spend more than the entire bottom 50% combined. So that's kind of a crazy stat. What can you actually do with that information? I think the important thing to remember is that the way to increase your overall customer lifetime value is by spending more on getting and retaining those super high value customers, and try to focus less on the customers that don't come back, that don't spend as much, that are kind of the one and done people, or the people that only buy when they get. And trying to do that research and understand which customers have the highest LTVs. It gives you really great insight into retargeting, how to craft your messaging, who your ideal customer is, and all different strategies about how you engage with your buyers. We can go ahead to the next one. So this one is actually a screenshot of a dashboard in RJMetrics. This is around basically how your marketing spend interacts with your customer lifetime value. So in the interface, you're basically seeing on the top, it's a list of all the metrics around your different campaigns. It's how many customers were acquired, how much revenue came from their orders, what was their 90-day lifetime value, what's the ROI on ad spend. But the real key thing, those bar charts there, there's 2 things that you want to know when you're analyzing your ad spend in conjunction with lifetime value information. Basically, which campaigns aren't working, so you need to either stop them, or you need to change up the targeting, change up the messaging, change them up somehow, and which ones really are working, which have huge ROIs, and which should you just insert $1 to get $1.50 or $2 out as many times as you can. And that's how you really want to boil these things down to, is like what's working, what's not, and then let's focus all of our energy onto what's working. We can go to the next one. Great. Measuring lifetime value, you start to uncover more and more actionable insights of different kinds. So this chart right here is actually my favorite one from the investor report that we just released, and that's linked on the side there. It shows how the first purchase value is actually an indicator of how many orders a customer will place over their lifetime. Because when you think about it, you talk about lifetime value, and you sign up a customer today, or you sign them up a month ago. You don't know with certainty what they're going to do over the course of the next months or years of engagement with your business. So you're looking for early indicators to help you decide how to interact with them. So when you bucket customers by the number of orders they ultimately place, and then you look back at their first order values compared to the average, we definitely see a trend there, that loyal customers have much higher first purchases. And repeat customers, the ones that go on to spend more later, they spend more on their first purchase on average, and the people that only buy once, they spend less. And so if you look at the people that's made 4 or more purchases, they, on their first order, are spending 15% more than average, and people who place 8 orders or more on their first order are spending 23% more on average. So things like that really allow you to, from the get-go, analyze which customers are going to be good, which ones are maybe not the ones you want to focus on, and help improve your targeting as early as possible. We can head to the next one. So CLV, there's a couple different ways to calculate it, and there's a lot of different nuances. It's a topic you could go really deep on, but at its root, it's a pretty simple calculation. You take your AOV, the average order value, and you multiply that by the number of customers on average the number of orders that your customer makes. So that's the total amount they're spending over their lifetime. And then you subtract out the cost to acquire that customer. And there's all different variations around looking at gross margin rather than total revenue, or allocating some of the fixed costs, or potentially trying to project out, for customers that aren't deep into their life cycle already. And those are all interesting things, but I'll leave that aside for this conversation. But basically, there's 2 ways that you can increase CLV. You can either increase the average order value of the purchases they're making, or you can increase the number of orders that a customer makes, increasing their loyalty, just like Chad was talking about. So 2 of the findings from our report were focused on loyalty and retention. And basically, you can focus on these customers that are making repeat purchases, but it's really important to see how these purchases affect the bottom line. So we've got 2 charts here. We're looking at the percentage of revenue from repeat purchases and from first-time purchases. The chart on the left shows the bottom 3 quartiles, the ones that aren't the top performers, and the chart on the right are the top performers. So if you look closely at it, and it might be a little bit small if you're not on a big monitor, and you can see all these charts blown up in our report, but basically already in month 1, there's a big difference. The top e-commerce companies are generating 20% of their revenue from return customers in the first month that they launch, which blew my mind when we saw that data. At the close of year 3, they've got periods where they're generating over 60% of their revenue from repeat customers. And the bottom 3 quartiles, the people on the left, are definitely showing different behavior. In month 1, they're like 10 or 13% from repeat customers, and they never really break much more than 50% of repeat customers over time. Now, there's not really a quote-unquote right number here. These numbers can get a little screwy because there are things that you might think, oh, it's good to have as much revenue as possible from repeat customers, but let's say all of your new customer acquisition strategies started to fail overnight. Well, your revenue from repeat customers would shoot through the roof in terms of percentages. So you need to look at this chart in context of your customer acquisition to get an understanding, but this is something you really want to watch, because if you're not getting the repeat revenue, then there's something wrong with your follow-up with your customers in terms of the drip campaigns they're getting. There may be a problem with the product. There may be potentially problems with shipping. You really got to dig into that and figure out what's going on there. And the loyalty on the next slide. So this is how long does it take us to convert a brand new customer into a loyal customer. This is another case where the top performing retailers are doing better than everybody else. For them, the second order comes days sooner than the average for everybody else. So that's thinking about the time from when the first order is placed to the second order. It's 12 days faster. And this acceleration actually holds true throughout the entire customer life cycle. At each step along the way, the top performing companies are generating these excellent loyal customers faster, and they're getting them to buy again and again faster than the average company does. If we flip to the next slide, there's another way of looking at a related set of data. The blue marks show how the top performing customers are ahead of the rest of the pack at each order number. And the customers of those top performer, by the time you look at when they get up to their 10th purchase, so I talked about before in the last slide that they get to the second purchase 12 days faster. By the time they get to the 10th, they're on average 61 days faster. So if you're thinking about your payback periods, how fast you can convert that customer acquisition spending into revenue and then recycle that back into marketing, it's a full 2 months faster for these top performing retailers. We can go to the next one. So back in our buyer behavior benchmark, that we saw that the repeat purchase probability increases with each order. So that means that once you've gotten the customer to make one order, what are the odds that they'll go on to make a second? And given the fact that they've made two, what are the odds they'll go on to make a third, and so on? So in the average company, there's about a 32% chance that a customer who's made one purchase will go on to make a second purchase. But when you have someone who's made two purchases, the odds of them going on to make a third are about 53%. And so by increasing this probability and decreasing the time between orders, like we were talking about before, it's a great way to unlock loyalty and increase that LTV and CLV. Going on to the next one, loyalty is obviously important. And I want to show you how many more loyal customers the top-performing companies have. And this chart is another one that might be a little bit hard to read unless you're on a large monitor. But basically, the point here is that top-performing companies have more customers at each of these order buckets. So at order number 1, they've got more. At order number 2, order number 3, it keeps going. And if you think about the assets that companies have, or if you read that book about Amazon, the Everything Store, Jeff Bezos was always talking about the flywheel. You know, what are the things that once you put them in motion, create this renewable resource that keeps giving the business a sustainable competitive advantage? The existing customers is really an unbelievable source of ongoing business success. They're the ones that are referring other customers. They're the ones that are making repeat purchases. And it's really just shocking once you look at the cumulative effect over months and years how many more customers these top-performing companies can get. So if we fast forward to the next slide and we look at only the order buckets 4 and on, so that's really only the people that are already loyal and looking at them. The top e-commerce companies have over 13,000 more customers making their 4th or higher purchase. Sorry, they've got 13,000 more customers making their 4th or highest purchase. So that's how many loyal customers we have, assuming we're taking 4 or more to be loyal. And that's 5,000 more than the people in the other 3 quartiles combined. So this is huge. This is not like, being okay is almost as good. There's huge differences between these top performers and everybody else. And this is one of the most significant factors for these top-performing companies and why in some markets it's almost like a winner-take-all or winner-take-most. Yeah, and that's why building a brand is so valuable, because it allows you to get to that scale and leverage those repeat customers for all the valuable things they can create for you. I'll kick it back over to Chad now.
Okay, awesome. So I saw a couple questions rolling in while you were talking. So everyone continue to ask your questions over on the right side, and we'll go through those towards the end. So really quickly, a couple key ways to maximize your lifetime value. Email marketing and retargeting is one of those. Retargeting, a lot of people think of that more on the acquisition side, but by doing things like uploading your emails into some sort of CRM tool where you can create ads based off the emails and focusing retargeting and targeting more around your existing customers that you know are high performing is another really great underutilized strategy for retailers. A lot of people focus too much on email, so consider how you can also take maybe people who've opted out or bounced emails or stagnant customers and put those into a retargeting campaign and show them some sort of promotion to win. Another way is to create a strategy for post-conversion customer engagement. So a lot of the retailers that we talk to are just focused on how do I just blast these people with sales and campaigns to get them to come back and place that second order. So a lot of things that you can do around customer engagement go beyond just getting them to place the order. Obviously, the ultimate goal is still placing the order, but getting customers to join a contest, refer their friend, upload a video, submit user-generated content. There's a lot of things that you can do post-conversion to start building that loyalty and create those long-term customer segments. And also, like Jake was mentioning, you really have to focus on those VIP customers. If you don't know who that top 10% of customers are, they're going to be the ones generating that disproportionate amount of revenue. So you have to know who those customers are and really work to treat those customers differently. So advocacy, how do you drive customer referrals and how do you track that back to a referral number? So first of all, why do you need to track who these top advocates are? So we just identified that these may or may not be the customers who are post orders, and we've seen the value of that, but how do you actually figure out who these customers are so that you can engage with them and treat them differently? So one thing to note here is that your advocates are the ones that create your K factor or your virility. So if you're not familiar with the concept of K factor, it's basically a number, and that number represents for every customer you get, how many customers is that customer going to drive back to your brand. So just in context, Facebook I think had a K factor of around 1.1 or 1.2. So for every to Facebook, they knew that that was going to generate one and sign. And also identifying who those industry leaders are. So some creative ways to make the most of your top advocates. One is to create a direct relationship. Like we've been talking about this whole time, you really, once you know who these people are, you want to treat them different. You want to treat them in a special way. And it's going to be a small enough number where you can really focus on creating a direct relationship with this group of people. Number two here, offer a referral program. So a referral program by itself is not going to get people to share out. It's not going to get people to become advocates. But if you have a product that people are already talking about and you already see some segment of customers who are willing to become advocates, they're sharing, they're talking about your brand, they're telling their story, by having a referral program, it's going to boost that organic activity that you see. And also, you need to be able to identify and segment out who these customers are in your CRM, so again, you can treat them differently. So referrals by the numbers. Referred customers are 25% more profitable and they're 18% more loyal than any other customer group. 50% of the people are more likely to give a referral if they're offered a direct incentive. So like I was saying before, having an incentive isn't going to automatically make those referrals, but they're going to be more likely to give you a referral if you do have an incentive in place. And then people are 4 times more likely to buy whenever they're referred by a friend. So we see this from our analytics, but the conversion rates are almost always going to be higher from a referred customer. So a quick case study, Hanes.com, they set up a referral program, and within 2 weeks it basically paid for the program, and now it's one of their top acquisition channels, and it continues to grow as they get it more integrated into their marketing. So, putting it all together.
Yeah, so putting it all together is kind of a great way to describe what it is that we do at RJMetrics. We have 2 products, and you know, like Pete said at the top with the intro, we're a data consolidation and data analytics company. So our first product is Cloud BI, and we call it, and I think it really is, a complete analytical platform for online businesses. So I'm guessing that if you're listening to this webinar, you probably have data in a bunch of different places. You've got a shopping cart, you have an email service provider, you're advertising on AdWords and Facebook and a bunch of other places. You have Google Analytics, you use AddShoppers, you use lots of different tools to track all the different parts of your business. And each of those different tools, it has a reporting panel, it has information you can get out of it, which is good, but there are questions that you want to ask that aren't supported by the interface in those tools. And there are some of the most interesting questions involves data from combining a lot of those tools. So what Cloud BI does is it integrates with over 30 different data sources. It also accepts, spreadsheets and CSV files, and you can send any data you want to our API. So it can really take any data. And then it consolidates that data, loads it into a data warehouse, runs a bunch of transformations on it, and the end result is that you get dashboards, reports, and visualizations help you answer questions, all like the things that we've been talking about. So things like customer lifetime value, average order value, return on marketing spend, segmenting the customers by different things, pulling lists of customers that, rated you 10 out of 10 on a certain product. Those are probably going to be some great people to refer. All things like that are things you can get out of Cloud BI. And it's a totally managed platform set up by our analyst team and really tailored to help e-commerce companies succeed. So that's one product we have. The other one is called Pipeline. If we just go to the next slide for that. So Pipeline is for someone who's a little bit more do-it-yourself. We have a really powerful visualization and dashboarding system in Cloud BI, but there are a lot of folks out there who love using Tableau or Looker or Mode Analytics or Chartio or Periscope or lots of different tools for analyzing their data, or just they like running SQL queries, or maybe they're super technically sophisticated learning algorithm that sits on top of their data. Well, that's great. And if you want to do any of those things, what you need to do is, just like I was saying before, you've got your data in all these different spots. You need to get it in one spot so that you can put those other tools on top of it. So Pipeline is basically the extraction of just that functionality from Cloud BI and connects to those 30-plus different data sources, helps you load it all into a data warehouse really simply, and then lets you do really whatever you want with it. It's the combination of those two things that we think is really powerful for retailers, depending on how they want to interact with their data. But those are the two products from RJMetrics, Cloud BI and Pipeline.
Okay, great. So real quickly, I know we've got a bunch of questions rolling in, and we only have a couple minutes left, so I'm going to kind of fly through these last few slides here. But how do you improve your brand's shopper journey? One is to map out the journey and aggregate all your data. So if you remember this table that we were looking at a second ago, it really is all about being able to capture all this data so that you know what's happening and where you can start to move the dial. Two is to pick a focus, identify all the metrics that you can improve, and then start to rank them by estimated impact, dollar investment needed, and then time required to build out and test. And one of the ways that we like to do this internally is what we call the engineering design process. So step one is to ask or identify what the needs are, and then you start to research the problem, imagine solutions, plan out what a solution would look like, and then you create, test, and improve as you go. And you basically continue this cycle in like a 1 or 2 week sprint, or however long you need to capture significant data. So another real quick note here, we do have an integration with RJMetrics, so the data that you see in AddShoppers, you're also going to be able to push back into RJMetrics, and then with the data that you see in RJMetrics, it's going to help optimize the campaigns that you run through AddShoppers. So we've got the questions here, so I'm going to pass it back over to Peter to run through a couple of those.
All right, guys, so we're going to go ahead and take questions. If you do have a question, make sure to get it in now because we are coming up on time here. So I'm going to go ahead and take the first one here. So this looks like a good one for Jake. So from Scott, how do you join multiple data sources when using Cloud BI? By pushing them to a centralized data warehouse?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And the short answer is that that's exactly right. And I think, in our opinion, that's the best and really the only way to really do it right. So we have native integrations with a bunch of different tools, AddShoppers being one of them. And basically, we're replicating the data from those different data sources into our data warehouse that we manage for our customers. And then we can basically run a bunch of transformations because the data in the AddShoppers versus the data in Zendesk versus the data in Shopify, it looks a little bit different and sometimes it's not totally straightforward. So we need to do some things to change it up so that you can easily join those two different data sources together. That's stuff that we've done for hundreds of different e-commerce companies, but you've got the basics of it right, where we need to pull it all in, get into a data warehouse, and that's where all the interesting slicing and dicing happens.
Cool, sounds good. Hope that answers your question, Scott, and thanks for setting that in. Next up from Sophie, this is a good one for Chad here. How can you integrate personalization on the site directly?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of great tools out there, but really step one to personalization is getting all of your data, like Jake is mentioning here, but getting that data and then making it actionable while people are on the site. So usually that's done through something like a data management platform or some sort of JavaScript or cookie-based session data. So for example, once you know that a customer comes to your site and they placed 3 orders in the past, or a customer came from a certain channel and they are one of the top 10% of customers, once you have that data, then you can make it actionable while they're on the site, whether that's showing them specific new promotions or asking them to join something like a referral program. So typically with personalization, there's a lot of separate tools that you can use out there. There's things that'll help with product recommendations or things that'll help with whatever else it might be. But in general, you want sort of that concept of one data warehouse or one data management platform that you can execute that personalization based off of, so you get more of a holistic view of the customer.
All right, next question here. This is kind of a broad one, but it might be good for both Jake and Chad. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the question here. So it's, what would your suggestions be for an e-commerce company that just started 3 months ago? And in the interest of time, let's each submit like our one top suggestion for this question here. And I'll let you start, Jake.
Sure. I'm somewhat biased, but I think the most important thing to do early on is start collecting the data. It's actually less important that you're analyzing it from day one, but the thing that you don't want is that, at some point, a couple months in or a year in, you're going to want to start analyzing that data. And if you haven't been collecting it, then you need to start collecting it and wait for that lag time. So there's lots of free or low-cost tools, things like GA, things like AddShoppers, and then just get them instrumented right and getting that data collected, and then you can worry about actually analyzing and getting value out of it at a later date.
Yeah, and I think my suggestion is probably going to be really similar. At that early of a stage in the company, it's all about knowing your customers, knowing why, how, and what. So I mean, if it's not a huge customer base, then pick up the phone and talk to them. It's all about data collection, getting real information from your customers that creates a loyal lifetime value of a customer. I know for us with AddShoppers, we always try to talk to as many customers and clients as possible to get that direct feedback, because we're only talking about a couple hundred people. So it's harder in the B2C space, but while you're still smaller, that's an advantage. And within that first 3 months, you really want to get as much feedback from your customers as possible.
All right, cool. One quick question I just wanted to address. I see some people asking about, is the webinar going to be available afterwards? Yes, it will be. We are recording it, so we will be sending you both the webinar and the slides here. As soon as it's done, we'll get that uploaded and sent out to you guys. So next question here, I'm going to actually combine two that came through. So what are the best email pop-up apps for Shopify, where you can segment out new versus existing customers and do A/B testing? And also, what are the best referral programs that integrate with Shopify?
Yeah, I'm not really 100% sure on Shopify. I know they have a lot that come in and out of their marketplace from independent developers and things like that. But I think the more important thing is getting something in place that isn't just going to be set up one time and then it's just left there to grow stagnant and no one ever ends up using it. So whenever you're thinking about things like email captures or creating the referral program or different parts of this shopper journey, just keep in mind that there's a lot of tools out there that you can just plug in, turn on, and then they just sort of become stagnant over time. So you really want to look for more of like a solution, or if you have someone internally that can manage those tools, then that's great. But just keep that in mind as you're looking for them. I don't have any specific recommendations, but they have a ton in their app marketplace.
All right, cool. So one last question here, and then we're going to shut down the Q&A in the interest of time. So where can we find industry benchmarks for conversion rates? Yeah, so that's the question. Where would we find good industry benchmarks for conversion rates?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Chad.
I think a lot, you're going to see a lot out there where it comes from a specific provider like a Monetate or someone along those lines. I think Business Insider does several industry reports. There's not like one centralized source. I know that Mattermark does a lot of really great industry stuff across like raising money and funding companies, but I feel like there's not something like that for e-commerce. Do you know of anything, Jake?
Yeah, I was just going to say, so we've put out now, I think it's like 6 different benchmarks. You can see them all at rjmetrics.com/resources. There's some data in some of them about conversion rates, but I think your original point is really true, that each source of these benchmarks is it's colored by the data set it has access to. So we have access to the data on all of our customers, and we collaborate with Mattermark and get their data as well. And if you look at someone like Monetate, they'll have a really rich sample for probably larger e-commerce. So I think for all these benchmarks, it's useful to look at those numbers, see how you compare, see where the biggest opportunity for growth is, but just know that they're directionally useful, and as you're running your business, they're best for generating hypotheses about your business, but ultimately you just need to test what works best for you and what gives you the biggest lift.
Yeah, and I think, so the second part of that question was, for example, where would a retailer like IKEA fit into this? So I think if you back into the tools that IKEA is using, so if you go to a site like builtwith.com and you put in IKEA, it's going to show you all of the tools that IKEA is using, and then you can look at industry reports from any of those individual providers, and hopefully that'll give you a little better idea of kind of what they're seeing inside of that home and garden vertical, which is probably what IKEA would be grouped under.
All right, cool. So that is the end of the Q&A. So a couple notes. Again, this is going to be recorded, or it is being recorded, and it'll be sent out. If you want to learn a little bit more about RJMetrics, you see the URL on the page. Just go to rjmetrics.com. Thanks again, Jake, for joining us. We really enjoyed having you on. So now what we're going to do, anybody that wants to stick around, I'm actually going to go ahead and jump into a live demo of AddShoppers. So if you're interested or just curious in kind of seeing what AddShoppers is and what we can do, I'm going to go ahead and start pulling that up now. If not, no worries, but let me go ahead and get this pulled up now.